Let's read the requirement again. Part 3A. Discuss the factors that the directors of KLOOF would consider to determine whether or not, therefore this is what we need to look at, yes to renew or no, not to renew. Therefore, this we need to consider. The lease at the end of the first 10 years, but no calculations are required. 6 marks. Now, how much do we need to write? Let's be conservative. If they allocate 1 mark per sentence, we need to write or include 6 decent marks. Right, guys? Now, 6 decent sentences. Now, on a new page, always indicate that this is your part 3A. Now, I've just drawn my story here to ensure that I understand. Remember, we have our second car hand dealership, we have our repair workshop, and we have the fuel station. The fuel station has an agreement with CalStar, the franchise agreement, and currently they have indicated to us that they want to close down the second-hand car dealership, and they would rather want to include a new building under the franchise agreement from CalStar. Okay, now the question is if they need to renew the lease agreement or not renew the lease agreement. Okay, guys, now let's refer back to our scenario and ensure that we understand and take into account all of the factors if they renew versus if they don't renew. Okay, so when we look at the first paragraph, they've indicated to us that the directors will reach retirement plus minus 10 to 12 years. Now, this is something we need to keep in mind. Why? Because our initial lease is for 10 years. If we include a timeline here, the initial lease period will be for 10 years, right? But they can extend this for another 5 years. But they've indicated to us that the directors are reaching retirement. Therefore, retirement age will be within the next section of the lease, the 5 years. Do you see this? Therefore, we don't know what are they going to do after retirement. Are they going to sell the business? Are they going to close it down? And this is something that they need to consider. And they need to consider this with renewing or not renewing. Therefore, we will have to indicate this, that this is a factor in both of our scenarios. Therefore, I'm going to indicate this here, that the directors, you will have to write out these sentences, guys, please. They are reaching retirement. Now, after they have retired, which is the plus minus 10 to 12 years, what are they going to do? If they renewed the lease, guys, what are they going to do with the lease? What are they going to do with the buildings? Are they going to close down? Are they going to sell? If they don't renew, what is going to happen with the building? Let's say here, what will happen with the building? Okay, we will look at this just now. Now, let's refer back to our scenario. I'm going to tick off the first paragraph. They indicate to us in the first bullet point, the second-hand car dealership will be closed down and CalStar will erect a new building, yes, which will be used as a convenience store, small bakery and coffee shop in the area currently occupied by the second-hand dealership. Yes, this is what we have indicated here, guys. This is new buildings, our blue buildings, right? All the different parts of the business will from the time onwards be regulated by the franchise agreement, and strict compliance will be required, in particular with regard to the shareholding. Okay, guys, I will say that this is a factor to consider. Remember, if they lease this, but the question is not if they should close down the second hand. The question is if they should renew the lease. Look at this, hey? If the agreement is breached, CalStar will have the right to terminate the franchise agreement and the property lease agreement. Based on CalStar's experience with similar convenience stores, they will prepare a preliminary estimate and they will provide this within the following week. Now, long-term convenience store lease agreement, this is what we need to focus on, right? They indicate to us that they will enter into a new lease agreement for both the existing buildings and the new building. Therefore, when we look at our picture here, this will include a new lease agreement for both, right? The lease period is expected to be 10 years and the company will have an option to renew the lease for a further 5-year period thereafter. If the option is not exercised, a balloon lease payment of 11.2 million will be payable at the end of the initial lease term. Now, this is something we need to think about. In our discussion, if they renew the lease, there will be no balloon payment. But if they do not renew the lease, they will have to pay an amount of 11.2 million at the end of the 10 years. Therefore, they will have to look at the cash flow. What will the cash flow projections be in terms of this money? Will they be able actually to pay this? Huh, guys? We don't know. But this is a factor that they need to think about. And the requirement states that we need to discuss factors that they need to consider. We need to tell the directors what do they need to think about here. Hey? Okay. Then, when we refer back to the scenario, they indicate to us the third list in our agreement. The initial lease payment for the first year of the lease contract will be set at 7.5 million per annum, payable in 12 equal payments at the beginning of each month. Therefore, we know that this will be the payment that we need to consider. Guys, is this important to us? At this point of time, not really. Remember, when we look at our requirements, we only have to include about 6 complete sentences. Therefore, I'm not going to transfer anything about this. If I need something, I will, or need more sentences. Thereafter, the lease payment will escalate annually on the anniversary of the contract with the consumer price index. Okay, so this indicates to us that our lease payment will increase each year. We have identified that there's a variable payment, and then if KLOOF elects to renew the lease, ownership will transfer to it at the end of the lease. If not, ownership will not transfer. Now, this is important to identify. If we look at this, if they renew the lease, they will receive ownership, right? If they don't, they will not receive ownership of the lease. But guys, what do we need to keep in mind here? If they do not, they won't receive the ownership. But if they do, they will receive ownership. But if they do not renew the lease, they will have to pay the 11.2 million. Now, they need to ask themselves the question, do they want ownership? Look at this. Do they want this ownership? Why is this a question to raise? Because they will reach retirement. Therefore, do they want this ownership? What are they going to do when they retire? Are they going to sell? Are they going to close down? Okay? But the risk, if they do not have ownership after the 10 years, look at your timeline. What will happen with the additional buildings? Will CalStar rent this out to another lessee? Will CalStar stop providing them with fuel? Then their fuel business, when you look at our picture, then their fuel business won't be worth anything. Will they lease this out to another lessee, which will be competition? What is going to happen after the 10 years? And that they need to keep this in mind, right? And the question in terms of if they want ownership, guys, at the end of the 15-year period, what will the value be of this building? If you take the value into consideration with the fact that they have ownership, what will the maintenance be? What will cash flow be? Versus not having ownership, and we have the risk of having another lessee next to them. Okay, guys, this is factors, things to consider, things to think about. Right, okay. Now, when we look at this, guys, they indicate to us the useful life of the building is expected to be 25 years, residual value 3 million. And the following incremental borrowing rates are being considered. Okay, so we had to include about plus minus 6 sentences. If you look at this, guys, by identifying the difference between either renewing or not renewing, this would have helped us because we can allocate 3 plus minus, right? Therefore, either if they renew, there won't be a balloon payment. But if they do not renew, there's a balloon payment, and they need to consider cash flow, right? Therefore, I will say that this is at least a proper sentence, right? Then, if they renew, they will receive ownership, but they need to think about the possible future value and what will the maintenance be on this building. Will they be able to afford this? If they do not renew, there's a possibility of someone else leasing that property or closing down. And with this, we need to think about the retirement. Guys, what are they going to do after retirement? Important. Therefore, when we look at this, guys, you will already be able to score sufficient marks to pass this question. You just need to sit back and think, what do you need to include? You need to talk about the factors that the directors have to consider to make the decision to renew or not renew.